Okay, so let's quickly talk about a game that I'm having a lot more fun with than I thought I would leading up to the release of it, and that is Returnal. It's the latest PlayStation 5 exclusive that was released last week by Housemarque, who had done games like Resogun, so seeing them take on a AAA roguelike game was pretty interesting to hear about, and now seeing it and actually playing it, yeah, I think they did a very good job with this game. But a couple of controversies around this game have started to pop up online, and I wanted to go over those here today. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave Plus channel, make sure you subscribe down below. So the first controversy we're going to look into actually has to do with the resolution of the game. Now, Housemarque decided to go more in favor of frame rate with this game as opposed to pushing, say, native 4K resolution. I'm sure they could have done that, but it probably would have been a shaky 30 frames per second at best. Instead, after Digital Foundry put their video out, it's become clear that they went in favor of going with something like a 1080p resolution for the game, using different techniques like temporal upsampling to move it to 1440p, and then from there use checkerboard rendering to get it to 4K. So yeah, technically this game is 1080p on the PlayStation 5, and that seems to have set the internet off a bit here. Now, the game itself, when you are playing it and no one has told you it's 1080p, I don't really think people notice or care, to be honest. This is something I mentioned on Twitter. It didn't seem like people cared that Returnal was 1080p until they were told that Returnal was 1080p. And sometimes that's just the way it is with these technical analysis. I mean, they're giving us solid, correct information, and at times people take that info and do what they want with it, but it ends up generally in the realm of fanboy wars with this, since Returnal is a lot of fun, and to be honest, when I'm playing it, I have a hard time looking around at any one thing and being like, wait a minute, that looks kind of blurry. I don't know. Are we sure this is 4K? Half the time I'm just trying not to get hit with different projectiles in the game. And I think a lot of this has to do with the buildup that we went through going up to these systems and this generational release, because I talked about this before with like the Switch Pro even that's coming up, telling people, hey, be careful with those expectations, because a lot of times these devices, these systems are built up as these mythical machines, but at the end of the day, they're like, for example, the PS5 is $400 or $500, depending on if you get the digital version or not. And we're expecting it like 4K, 60, ray tracing, 3D audio, all these different things. But then when the system comes out and these technical analysis videos come out, the cold hard slap of reality and where they have to make sacrifices comes into play. And generally people have a hard time understanding the way that Housemarque wanted to do with this game and go more towards frame rate. And I'll be honest, the way it looks, I think it looks fine in motion when I'm playing it. I wouldn't have even been like, oh, this looks like 1080p or something on like a 4K monitor, even on a larger 4K set. But I do like the idea of them going more towards frame rate, because if this game was like 4K, 30 frames per second, like 4K native, it just wouldn't feel as good in motion when you're controlling your character, moving around, phasing through different projectiles, firing back at the right time. There is a lot of precision that's involved with this game. So I'll actually even notice some of the frame dips that happen in the game, because they're not often, but you can notice them when you're maybe swinging the camera around to look at different things, if there are a lot of enemies on screen. And believe it or not, that actually frustrates me more than the idea of the image being maybe a little soft. Now, I had also mentioned before this generation started that I felt like we would see more and more upscaling techniques used, mostly because it's becoming so advanced now. And we've talked about things like DLSS with NVIDIA and AMD doing their own super resolution solution, for these different systems, Microsoft looking into it. And I feel like we're going to hear about this with other games where there's a lower like native resolution that has all kinds of techniques used to get it to 4K so you can have an overall smoother experience. And for the most part, we get side-by-side images of these things, especially with like DLSS. And in some cases, because the assets will be rendered differently and upscaled, they sometimes look better through DLSS, that's deep learning super sampling, than a native 4K image, which is really interesting. I feel like, though, that's kind of the direction we're going to be going in when it comes to these technical analysis videos. But as I've said before, at the end of the day, it comes down to if the game's fun to play. That's why I'll play games on the Switch that are like 720p or below. Yes, the image is pretty soft looking, but the game is just fun. So in Returnal's case, yeah, it's 1080p native technically, and it's upscaled through all kinds of different things to get 4K. But I'm having a blast with the game, so really, when it comes to video games, I guess that's all that really should matter. That said, the other controversy makes a lot of sense and is one that I am completely on board with. It has to do with the idea of save states in Returnal. Now, I know what you're thinking. Wait a minute, you can have a save state in this game. The idea is when you die, you have to go back, and then you have to go through another randomized run to try to get a different build and all. Yeah, I get that, but the idea here would be there would be a temporary checkpoint system. So like when you go through a door into a new room, for example, or you get to a certain point in your run, it would make a save state that would then be destroyed when you reload from it. And it wouldn't reload if you die. In fact, if you die, it would erase that save and you would go back to the start like normal. The idea of this save is if you have to quit out mid-run, and some of these runs can last a while. There was one that I was going through, and I believe it was the second boss. I beat the second boss, and I had gone all the way through to that. I decided to kind of grind up my character a bit more, so I was a bit more equipped to deal with the second boss, and I actually ran right through that boss, and then from there, I ran right to the third boss. And this run ended up being fairly long, and I'm going to tell you, the robots in the third biome are really annoying, so I was taking my time going through that, and before I knew it, I was a couple hours deep in this run, and I thought to myself, well, there are a lot of people who probably would want to be able to pause and maybe then just back out of the game and pick it back up the next day or something, right? Especially if you're playing late into the night or something there, just having this really good run. Unfortunately, with Returnal, that is not the case. So people are being forced to leave the PlayStation 5 in rest mode in order to suspend their run, essentially. And the problem we're running into now is that the PS5 itself is fighting back because updates are being pushed for Returnal, right, as they're going through, and they're fixing bugs and all this. As expected, they run support for the game after it's released just to clean up anything that people are finding in the game and issues that pop up. But unfortunately, when they push an update, the PS5 auto updates, and what does it do? Well, it shuts the game down. In fact, there are several people online who are saying, wait a minute, I put my PlayStation 5 in rest mode because I was having such a good run in Returnal. I had this awesome gun, plenty of health. I mean, the max integrity, this bar was huge going across the bottom of the screen. I was ready for that hard boss that I had been grinding up to be able to beat. Unfortunately, though, when an auto-update, it shut the game down. Everyone's posting screenshots. It's a very frustrating thing to the point where Housemarque has now said you have to turn that off. Like, turn off auto-update on your PlayStation 5. And at this point, follow what other roguelikes have done, because when people say that defeats the purpose of the game, that tells me they probably have not played a lot of very good roguelike games that are out now. Like, Dead Cells has a system where you can quit out, and it'll do a checkpoint for you. So, like, to say Returnal couldn't is just incorrect. It doesn't actually damage the integrity of the game with this roguelike setup. I just kind of feel like when this game went into development, which could, years ago, the roguelike genre wasn't as built up as it is now, where we see things like Hades and Dead Cells and kind of the steps they've taken to improve their games. Housemarque would have put this game out now, and they're probably looking at it saying, okay, what can we do to continue improving and updating this game? And I do think that temporary checkpoint or suspend feature is probably something that should be added to this game just to make it more manageable for people who can't sit down for 3, even 4 hours at a time if they're going to make a serious run and try to beat the game. But let me know what you guys think about these two controversies, these two conversations that are popping up online. If you agree with me about them or disagree, either way, let me know in the comments. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.